As per usual, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing with the internet. I think I figured out what I did wrong last time. You know, when you hit the old go live button, the button that pops up after the go live button is the end broadcast button. So if you double click that, you go live and end your broadcast right away. That was fun. Welcome in, everybody. I'm going to just kind of piddle around for a second. I am early. I do apologize for that. I've said it before, but my stream schedule, my recording schedule, it's a thing. And so if you have subscribed and you want to catch the live streams, you want to make sure you're there and participating in the live stream, I would suggest the notification bell. I do try to go live around 8 o'clock. Today, I have kind of promised my kid that I would start book 3 of the Wing Feather Saga. So I'm gonna try to do that. I'm gonna try to make that happen. So that's part of what necessitated the early broadcast. But also, I've just got a bunch of stuff in my head that I'm sorting through, and it's like a pensieve, you know, from Harry Potter. It's just like sometimes you just got to take the thing out of your mind, put it somewhere else, so you're not preoccupied by it. And so that's part of what I'm doing here. I thought maybe I would read some of this before we really get into the essay from Bruce Malina. He wrote an essay that I want to look at, translating some of the words, the word where we get Judean, Jew, and sort of begin to unpack what we mean, what modern people mean by that, and then help you all understand why I feel that it is important to make the distinction that Jesus was a Judean and not necessarily a Jew, because I think we read back into the text a lot of our modern understanding of what the word Jew might be, or Judaism, or any of those things, and we can be unfair and anachronistic even to the Jewish religious leaders that Jesus was encountering. They certainly they would not agree with the idea that Jesus was a Jew. They rejected him for the most part. Not everybody did, but certainly some people did. And those that didn't reject him, we call them Christians. And so here we are. I don't know. So anyway, there is some stuff on the internet. I guess people are getting hot and bothered by this. I don't necessarily want to start with the hot and bothered stuff. Let's just jump into the article. The context is obviously, there's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on in the Middle East. But also just, I don't know. I do think that in some ways we are learning to use the internet to have open discourse. And so maybe that's part of it. But was Jesus a Jew? So part of that discourse is this. I'm not necessarily saying I'm a biblical scholar and here, trust me, I'm an expert. I'm a regular guy talking to my camera and to the internet, asking probably the same questions that you might be asking, and trying to understand those questions. I have ideas, I have thoughts. Some of those I hold for very good reasons. I think it would be very hard to convince me otherwise, but I'm very open, and so any ideas that I maybe propose tonight that you disagree with, I would love for your help to filter this article, and potentially, if we have the time, again, I don't want to fail. I do want to read to my kid. Let me see. I don't have these. I do have some of this conversation on Jacob Federecci's channel with Father Stephen D. Young that I might get to after we read this article. Again, time will tell. Time will tell. The context of Jacob and Father Stephen D. Young is, I think it's a helpful conversation because Jacob is coming at some of these questions from the Jewish perspective, whereas Father Stephen DeYoung is a Christian Orthodox. And so having both of those voices in the same place is very helpful. I think Jacob does a great job of hosting these conversations. So I appreciate Jacob. He actually helped me find some of these clips. And so, again, I we should be able to get to it. Some of the clips that I have, there's a lot to unpack, and so hang in there as we sort through it. Hopefully, it doesn't take too long to cover Malina's article, but here we go. Most historians, professionals, and non-professionals play fast and loose. Is that what he says? Play fast and loose with the term Jew, and I do think that sets the context of my thinking here. Is like people throwing out this term and saying one thing or another, and it's like, well, what do you mean by the term Jew? They find Jews all over the ancient Mediterranean world as well as in the modern world. There is even a Jewish state on land, which from a biblical viewpoint was actually willed by God to Jesus, and those who believe in him. Galatians 3:16. Now, the promise were made for Abraham and his offspring. It does not say to his offsprings, as of many, but it does say to your offspring. That is to one person who is Christ. And if you belong to Christ, you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. And so the people of God, the family, the people of God would be those who follow in the faith of Abraham. I could say it like that. Now, I do think this conversation helps me understand what is meant by Israel as well. Are those who are descendant of Abraham's faith, is that what God means by Israel? When God thinks of Israel, is that what God is thinking? Or is there more to it? And other people would say there is sort of an ethnocentric version of that would be different. And I think Malina sort of helps us sift through that a little bit. This is something Christian biblical backers of the Jewish state overlook and refuse to, thus denying their Christianity. What do you think of that? Is that Christians denying their Christianity? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. To some degree, maybe. A lot of these thoughts come to me from my study of the book of Revelation. And Jesus is building a city. There is a city. There is no temple in that city, for he himself is the temple, right? So that idea to me it's more the idea that as a Christian, my citizenship is of the kingdom of heaven. My responsibility is as a steward of this earth and of the people that God has made, and to be sort of a light into a dark world, which I think would be, at least for me, one of the clues that I will use to help me understand what is meant by Israel. Whatever Israel is, it is a light to the Gentiles. It is a light to the nations. So if you're pointing to something that doesn't appear to be a light to the nations, then I think you're not pointing to Israel. So let that be what it is. Be that as may, the historical question is, and I would ask this question slightly differently, but is it historically accurate to find Jews in the Old Testament of the Bible? Is it a fair assessment of the past, or is it simply ethnocentric anachronism? And I do think that he's on to something here, particularly when it comes to the anachronism. This would be us taking a modern concept and reading, I'm not even looking at the chat. Sorry, guys. If anybody's here, welcome. Reading our modern concept back into the ancient world, and then ascribing a modern understanding of particular words, and assuming that the ancient people would have thought the same way about these words. And so, when the Bible uses the term that is often translated in English as Jew, were the authors thinking of that word the way modern people think of that word? No. That it would be anachronistic to say, well, they must have been thinking the same way as I do, being thousands of years separated from them. So I do think he's on to something here with anachronism. And I think his point here of he's not saying, is it historically accurate to find Jews in the Old Testament? He's not saying descendants of Abraham, the 12. Yes, we would look back into the Old Testament and find the 12 tribes. But what he's asking is Jews the way we would, modern people would read back into the text. So is it simply like calling Cicero an Italian American, Seneca Spanish American, Plato and Aristotle Greek American? After all, these are Italian, Spanish, Greek immigrants to the U.S., now citizens. So their ancestors must have been the same way as we are. Since there are Jews today, their alleged ancestors must have been the same as they are. Okay, so that would be the sort of the anachronism. And again, like I think I did say this, but there's no contentiousness here. That's not the point of this. I do think as I read his article, I do pick up on maybe something that is verging on that. And I don't want any of that to come through here. I'm trying to understand the biblical usage. And we'll get to the actual words here in a second that we translate into English. And because I want to be faithful to my understanding of who Jesus is, I don't want to read back into his life, something that would be a mistake. I want to understand the religious environment within which Jesus did his ministry. Because I think once we see that, we see things start to make sense to us. Why was he in Galilee so much, right? Like why was he somewhat hesitant to go into Jerusalem? He made a couple of trips there, but here's this Messiah, son of David, right? Of the tribe of Judah. He's in Galilee a lot. And what does that mean? If we understand the historical setting of Jesus, then I think we can understand his movements around the map, why he spoke to certain people the way he did, and then probably why some people really didn't like his message. So thank you for being here with me. If you are here, you're catching this later on. Again, let me know what you think, because I do think this is there's something to this that is that could be somewhat contentious. But again, I'm trying as a Christian to understand this. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to mess with anybody's understanding of their own heritage or their own history or anything like that. I'm trying to find the person of Jesus, right? And I'm trying to understand the Bible that I take as an authoritative word. So thank you for participating with me in that. Nearly 20 years ago, I noted the inadequate and fundamentally incorrect translation of the Greek word Ioudaios. I'm probably saying that a little bit wrong. With the contemporary English Jew. I published this observation for the first time in a book review of the social and ethnic dimensions of Matthean social history. Go Nowhere Among the Gentiles from Matthew 10:5 by Amy Jill Levine in Biblical Theology. The main reason for my contention in linguistics. The fact is that the meaning in language always derives from the social system of the speakers or the writers in this case. The word, okay, so the word father, we get the idea. We get how words work. The same holds true for Jew and Christian. I think there is a Christian component to this that I hope to unpack as well. In contemporary U.S. society, a Jew is a person who embodies the roles, behaviors, and values characteristics of Jews in America or European society. The Jewish state is culturally a Central European entity, according to Israeli sociologists at the University of Haifa. Okay, so the fact that the Jews of whatever ethnic pedigree and of whatever religious adherence all trace their Jewishness to the Jewish religion made normative by the Babylonian Talmud in the 5th and 6th centuries. Is that, yeah, and that is one way of understanding this, right? That's one way of understanding it. When we say, if someone says, I'm a Jew, are they referencing what Malina is talking about here? That they would trace their Jewishness to Jewish religion made normative by the Babylonian Talmud in the 5th and 6th century. And we'll get to it, but one of the reasons I think when Christians sort of refer to Jesus as a Jew, I don't think it's very helpful because it can just mean so many things. The Jewish religions and Jewishness in all its contemporary forms derive from the Babylonian Talmud of the 5th and 6th century AD. That seems strange to me, so give me your feedback here. I think certainly some people would say, well, no, we go back to the Old Testament, we go back to the Hebrew Bible. Jewish origins thus trace back only to the 5th and 6th century. And this is where I would also disagree with him. Not unlike the fact that all forms of Christianity today trace back their Christendom of the Council of Nicaea. I would say no. We certainly can point to the Council of Nicaea, but we would say that our origins go back much further than that, obviously to the person of Christ, and I would say even to Adam in the garden, etc., etc. Hence, it comes as no surprise to read among the Jewish scholars, for example, the common knowledge that Christianity is different from the religion of the Old Testament, but some are still unaware that Judaism, sometimes referred to as Rabbinic Judaism, as opposed to the religion of Judaism practiced during the biblical times, is a different religion from that of the Hebrew Bible. I think that that's helpful, and that Christians do need to understand that. There is how much fidelity is there to the original religion of the Hebrew Bible? That would be a question to ask in and amongst this conversation. What is different about it? Again, this is what Malina says, nearly everything. Its liturgy, forms of worship, its codes, its laws, its theologies. Citing Professor Reuven Firestone, its common knowledge is not so common, it seems, and if rabbinic scribes that emerged in later centuries formed the matrix of modern Jews and Jewishness, it could not have existed during the time of Jesus, the period of Israel's political religion rooted in Torah and temple. And if the rabbinic scribes that emerged in later centuries formed the matrix of modern Jews and Jewishness, it could not have existed during the time of Jesus and the period of Israel's political religion rooted in Torah and temple. Now, I think that this would be another way to understand it. What was the Jewish religious structure, Jewish religious system that Jesus confronted? That would be another way to understand Judaism. And I think right there you can see there's just he begins this by basically saying people are just too cavalier when they have these conversations. That's probably why, as we go into this Twitter space, it's like, yeah, of course you guys are going to be bickering at each other because you're not understanding each other. You're not really defining your terms well. And that's where I think Judean becomes a helpful term. Jesus was a Judean, but how much of the Jewish religious system did he acknowledge as faithful to what God had established for Israel? We'll get to that, I hope. First century usage. I thought this was helpful. 2 Kings 16:6 is the first time you have this word in the Bible. This is where we can get a little
Yehudi
participation from our AI voice, so you don't have to hear it from me.
Yehudi.
So, this is not the Greek word that he was talking about. And the NASB here translates it Judeans. And what was helpful for me was just sort of understanding that, like oftentimes there's a question: do I translate this word Jew or Judean? And the word is often Judean. So then that adds another layer to it. So Judaism means the customs and behaviors of Judeans. It's the first, 2 Kings 6:16 is the first time we see this word referring to men of Judea. Perhaps it should be emphasized that the problem with translation is due to the significance of the word Jew in contemporary usage. To put Jews in the first century is simply anachronistic and, for modern Jews, ethnocentric. Yet there may be reasons for confusing. See, okay, that's where I say he gets a little bit contentious. Yet there may be reasons for confusion since the term was made to bear double freight in the first century. That is part of it. Double, maybe even more. You're using the term to mean more than one thing. And so it needs to be clear what we're saying. As previously noted, the term means pertaining to people of the land of Judea, a person following Judean customs and mores, an Israelite emigrant. Now, here's an interesting thing. Again, what is Israel? And it would seem to me that if someone is pointing to Judea or Judaism, they are making a distinction from Israel. Of course, we could look at the two kingdoms, the northern and the southern kingdom. Now, I think that is part of the reason why I think it's important to look at Jesus' ministry and where he is geographically. But if I'm claiming Judaism, if I'm claiming Judea, am I then saying not Israel? And when people say that Judaism, or they use the term Jew or Judaism interchangeably with the word Israel, it further confuses things. Because again, it's not, what does God mean? What does God think of when God thinks of Israel? That's the question. First century Judeans distinguished themselves from Galileans, Pereans, with all three making up the house of Israel, or Israel. Note that in Josephus' life, for example, the word Ioudaios likewise always means Judean. It refers to the section of the country and or people living in it. Outside of Judea, Hellenistic people called members of the house of Israel Judean after the location of the primary city and temple. And this kind of goes back to, this is like Second Temple, Zerubbabel. There's this, an emergence of religious and cultural life centered around the temple in Jerusalem. Israelites likewise called themselves Judeans, regardless of whether, so I guess he's saying sort of after this, whether they were Galilean, Judean, or Perean in the land of Israel. Judean and Greek served as an Israelite self-designation for Israelite residents of Judea and Israelite residents outside of Judea who were Greek. Greek-speaking Hellenistic, Greek-practicing Hellenistic customs, and sharing Hellenistic values and ideas. Okay, we want to skip some of this. I'm not doing a very good job of it. This, I think, becomes important. Jesus is born in Bethlehem of Judea. He is sought after as the king of the Judeans. Matthew 2:2. So we go to Matthew 2:2. Now we're in the Greek. And now we have the word. This
Ioudaios.
So then the translator has a question here. Do I translate this word to mean Jews or Judeans? It's the word for Judean.
Ioudaios.
Note that throughout the gospel, Matthew contrasts Judea and Galilee. Again, where Jesus is important. Who he's talking to is important. John the Baptist appeared in the Jewish desert. Not in the Jewish desert, but in the Judean desert, the desert located in Judea. Jerusalem and all of Judea, not all of the inhabitants of Jewish land, right? So when someone has another way of describing something and they choose not to use those words and go instead in favor of like Judean, they're telling you something about what they mean by those terms. All of Judea came out to John. Jesus is clearly from Judea, is clearly not from Judea while he was born there, and is from Galilee. So he's coming from Galilee. And the significant events took place there. All right. So again, he moves around. It is interesting. I would say now some people would make the claim that Christianity sort of comes out of Judaism. I think that that's a misunderstanding because of the way we use these terms. Christianity, I would say, is more akin to John the Baptist. Of course, it's Jesus, right? Our origin is with the person of Christ. But when you look at John the Baptist, you're like, okay, there's something clearly different going on with this man. And certainly the same was true of Jesus. He just was very different than the religious system of the time that we would, we would refer to as Judaism. During the period of the Persian rule, it designated only a small area around Jerusalem, since that's where the Judeans were to be found. Under the Maccabees, the term Judea was used to refer to a larger population, which the Maccabees controlled. I would love to do more research on this, sort of expanding the term, which is probably... I'm trying to understand where we get the term today, so that sort of helps bridge the gap. There was something here. Yeah, and then it starts to become sort of common to just refer to this, the house of Israel, members of the house of Israel as Judeans, after the region in which the temple, the central place of worship, was located, Jerusalem and Judea. He makes this really, okay, so this is one point that I thought he made that was really good. John 8:31, there are Judeans who initially believe in Jesus, but after the conversation deteriorates, they decide Jesus is not really one of them. That, I think, is an important point. John 8, I think, would be an important passage. We can look at parts of it. But that, I think, is important. It would be like me saying all religions are essentially the same. Well, not all religions would agree with me, right? Islam would say, no, we're not like the Baha'i faith. So it would be unfair for me to say, hey, Islam and Baha'i are basically the same, because neither of them would agree with me. And if the Jewish religious leaders of Jesus' time made a clear distinction that Jesus was not one of them, then I think it's certainly not helpful to try to make the point that Jesus was a Jew, when really what we're saying is Jesus was a Judean. Again, we'll sort of there is mixing. There is overlap there. We'll get to it, because I think within that, Jesus is pointing to the true faith of Israel. Maybe in many ways, Jesus is Israel, right? You look at his life; he retraces the steps of Israel, goes down into Egypt, he comes back. I mean, his name is Yeshua, like his name is Joshua. Joshua conquered. Joshua brings Israel into the promised land. He, there's that passage where God, and maybe even more, but the one that I'm thinking of is like, where God is referring to Israel as my son, this singular idea that Israel is my son, my beloved son. There are Judeans who initially believed in Jesus, but after the conversation deteriorated, they decided he was really not one of them. I think that's an important point. This and Pilate does this fun thing, right? Jesus then makes it very clear to Pilate that his kingdom has nothing to do with Judean society. I wouldn't say nothing to do. Of course, Judah is still one of the 12 tribes. So it's certainly there's something of this that is to do with Judean society. Maybe not the way the Judean socialites wanted it to be, or the Judean religious leaders wanted it to be, but that was their choice, right? They could reject or receive the Messiah, and some of them did. I think of Nicodemus coming to Jesus by night. I love that conversation. It's just filled with irony. Anyway, of course, Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus is he gives the tomb over to Jesus. Very important. So even though his tormentors taunt him and mock the title King of the Judeans, the inscription over the cross has in it a wonderful irony that would have rankled Jesus's Judean opponents. It spells out Jesus's identification as Jesus of Nazareth, that is, Jesus a Galilean, is being designated King of the Judeans. Yeah, that is a great sense of irony. Of course, he is, a descendant of David, so there's still that part of it as well. The fact that the author of John uses the term Judean to designate others suggests to some that the author himself was a Galilean. That may be true. In Syria, Palestine, the common in-group name for members of the house of Israel was Israel. When members of this in-group sought to distance their own group from others in Israel, the distinction between Judean, Galilean, and Perea came into play. As noted previously, the common outgroup names for the house, the common outgroup name for the house of Israel was Judeans. So how the Hellenistic Greek world would have referred to the house of Israel was just by this more broadly understood Judean, largely perhaps due to the presence of the temple of God in Israel in Judea, along with the priesthood and the traditional kingship. Okay, I think that's also very important, right? Now, since Judea was not normally the way the inhabitants of that geographical area referred to themselves, they were Israelites, but rather the way outsiders referred to them. Okay. I do think there are some important parts. I am going to skip some of this article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I probably should have found like a link. I wonder if I could even share this. I could probably share I don't know. I've never tried to do that. I've never tried to share this is just Logos is projecting to the internet. There's some history here that I need to fill in the gaps. I'm a Christian person. The history of Israel is important to me. The history of Judaism is sort of adjacent to me, I would say. The Council of Nicaea, 325. So there's some parts of the history of Judaism that I'm just not familiar with. We have to find other people to fill in the gaps there. The Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, marks the beginning of Christendom. Again, I would disagree. Just like the Ben Zacchaeus Talmud of the 5th century AD marks the beginning of the Jewish religion. Help me out here, fam. The hive mind needs to fill in the gap there. Is he saying what we moderns would say Jew? We sort of hearken back to this 5th century. Consequently, the Jewish religion, as it exists today, is rooted in the 5th, 6th century Talmud, just as Christianity today is rooted in the 4th century Council of Nicaea and Christendom founded in Constantine. Okay. This does take me to the sort of two branches. I already mentioned the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. That does take me to that. What passage is that? It's a fascinating one. Is it Ezekiel 37? Man. You would think I would have my notes all prepared, man. We don't need all that. And now I lost my little screen. I need this little screen back. Cool. I think we found it. Oh, this is fascinating. The word of the Lord came again to me saying, okay, so the reason I was triggered by this was this idea of the origins of the Jewish religion and the origins of the Christian religion. Is there a way in which Jesus, in his ministry, is doing this very thing that is prophesied in Ezekiel? And you, son of man, take for yourself one stick and write on it for Judah and for the sons of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel, his companions. We talked about this when we did the book of Revelation, and the Ephraim, Joseph, the Joseph connection to Ephraim, obviously, okay, so Joseph, two sons, Ephraim, Manasseh, they get his double portion. And then later on, Israel, the northern kingdom, is associated with Ephraim, which is association with Joseph. So northern kingdom, Ephraim, Joseph, Judah, southern kingdom, and join them, that is the two sticks, for yourself, one to another. Sorry if I'm in the way. That they may become one in your hand when the sons of your people speak to you, saying, will you not declare to us what you mean by these things? Say to them, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions. I will put them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand. The stick on which you write will be in your hand before their eyes. Say to them, thus says the Lord, behold, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in one land. So Ephraim becomes, in a way, this sort of missionary tribe to the nations, to the Gentiles. Is this the book of Acts? Is this Acts chapter 2? Right? Like these different nations, the different tribes, these different nationalities, people coming from different nations. So is Jesus the one who is bringing those two sticks together? I would say so. I would say he is the true Israel in that sense, that he is the Son of God. He has the ability to bring them together. His ministry was in Galilee predominantly. He goes into Jerusalem on occasion, and he's sort of, and again, this kind of, there's this first and second coming of Jesus. He is like Joseph in his first, as he appears, what does Joseph do? Joseph goes to Egypt, and what does he do in Egypt? He rescues the Gentile. He rescues Egyptians. And Israel and his brothers are rescued by the overflow of Joseph saving the Egyptians. Joseph saves the Egyptians, and there is excess wheat that he then can give to the sons of Israel. And so rescue them, and they don't recognize Joseph when they see him. They don't recognize Joseph when they see him. He looks like a Gentile. He does not look like their brother Joseph. And yet they are saved as well. Who has the power to do that? I think there is only one, and I think it is Jesus. But then again, I'm a Christian, so of course I say that, right? Hey, if you have any questions, shoot them out there with me. I've been at it for 40 minutes. I'll try to go at a decent pace because, again, I do have kind of a lot of material that's just sort of in my brain. I think we're most of the way through this essay, if not maybe all the way through it. That's kind of it. So I'll go into my own sort of notes here, and some of this other content. We'll listen to some clips. How is Jesus interacting with the Jewish religious system of his day? That's a question that I have. We can see how the Jewish religious system interacted with Jesus. Clearly not a fan. Again, some people, you can look at sort of the Nicodemuses and the Joseph of Arimatheas. In Luke 4, Jesus does a very interesting thing that may help us understand. And again, I feel like I'm touching on something that is, essentially sort of outside of, I want to study this more, and I want feedback from people. So, but there's something about what Jesus does here that is sort of mysterious to me. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led around by the Spirit in the wilderness for 40 years. Okay, so he's tempted by the devil. It's really interesting because if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, is the question. Jesus returned from this. He returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread throughout the surrounding district. And he began teaching in their synagogues and was praised by all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read. So he clearly participated in the religious system, but watch what he does to some degree. He wasn't fully in, and of course, clearly the religious leaders, those who had power, did not like the way he was dealing with things. And the book of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him, and he opened the book and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has set me to proclaim the release of the captive, and recover the sight of the blind, and to set free those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." And then he closes the book, gives it back to the attendant, and he sits down, and all the eyes of the synagogue were fixed on him, and he began to say to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And you can choose to believe him or not. You can choose to accept him or not. But he's saying what he said. Today this scripture was fulfilled in your hearing. Why were all the eyes of the synagogue fixed on him? Because he closes the book before he's done reading. If we go back to this passage in Isaiah, which I thought would be right here. Hang with me. Of course, I don't have it memorized. Sorry, guys. find it. We'll find it. We'll find it. We'll find it. How's everybody's day? I can never just come up with this stuff. It's probably right in front of my face, and I'm like skipping over it, which tends to be my way. 61. Let me see if it's. Okay, so remember this. Set free those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. Then he closes the book. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He has set me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, the freedom of the prisoner, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort those who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, etc., etc., etc. He doesn't finish the passage in Isaiah. He just says, he stops at the favorable year of our Lord. And the day of vengeance of our God is yet to come. That's my interpretation. This, if you look at verse 2, if you look at the first two verses, and then you look at the rest of the passage, I think we have the first and the second coming. This is my interpretation. And one of the reasons I've heard from Jewish people that I've talked to that say Jesus was clearly not the Messiah is because, we don't have world peace. Like, this is not the reign of the Messiah has clearly not come. Just look out your window. It's clearly, he comes again. Like, that day is yet to come. And so, of course, we Christians have this funny religion that is sort of here and not yet. It is already, it is inaugurated, but it's not yet been consummated. It's sort of like we've been invited to the wedding feast, and it's like the wedding is going on, but there has not hasn't yet reached the climax. That's sort of getting gross, but you get the idea, right? Favorable year of our Lord, and the day of vengeance. The day of vengeance has not yet come. That would be my point. And so, what do we have here? We have Jesus sort of playing within the religious system, but he is clearly not part of it. And I would say that because the Jews of that time would have said, no, he's not among us, or whatever. I mean, again, that's even hard to say because some of them did. So, again, is Judaism part of this whole concept of Israel? And is it really just you're either obedient to God or not? There's really just two groups. Has nothing to do with our ethnicity, where we are geographically, financial status, gender, age. Are you in harmony with God or not? All right. Hey, let me know. Am I not, like, if you're here, just send me a wave or something. I'm not seeing any chat, and I'm starting to get sort of concerned that I'm actually I'm just talking into the oblivion here. So if you have, just let me know that you're here, I guess. And that way I know I'm not totally just talking into the oblivion. Of course, if you have questions, comments, input, share that as well. Thank you for helping me. Neutrino is here. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. It always takes sort of one to break the seal, right? The chat here on this channel, it's not super lively. It's not a big channel. We do what we can. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight, and being a part of this. And again, I am looking for some feedback. So if you have any, please let me know. We did hit a milestone on the channel, though, and I should mention that because I appreciate you guys and I appreciate what you're doing here. But I can't remember what the milestone was. 3,650 subscribers, I think, is what it was, which is interesting because I feel like this is sort of a season. Yeah, 3650. Thank you, everybody. It's been sort of hovering around that zone, and so breaking into 3,650 is quite a feat. Like, so I appreciate you guys. It is sort of a season. It's sort of like an off season for me a little bit. I'm sort of pacing myself. Of course, there's many videos that I could make, lots of things in my head. And thank you for hanging in there with these live streams, because usually I would be making this into a video, but as sort of time and my schedule permit, it's going to have to just be sort of a live stream. So Neutrina, thank you for being with me. Audio sounds okay, because that's my other question always. So and so Jesus does this, and again, it's funny as I think back to the Bible. And okay, are we translating? Should we be translating this word that we often translate Jew as Judean? Does that change anything? What would it change? There's lots of things that are interesting for me as I look. It's almost like, the switch gets flipped, and then you can't unsee it. You see it for what it is, and then it's like, oh, that's why Jesus is telling these parables. That's why he's telling parables of the tares and the wheat. There's something, and I said this to Jacob Federecci, and again, I'm sort of I will get to these clips, I think. Well, let me get to that. I do actually have a clip. I have that. I saw this from Jacob Federecci. Again, he's one of the guys that I sort of attempt to engage with on this subject. He and I play a different game, so we're not great dialogue partners. We would come to find out. I don't want to play by his rules. He doesn't want to play by my rules. And so we're sort of playing different games, but we're trying to, I think, maybe have similar conversations. Actually, ironically, I saw that he was live streaming, and I think the title of his live stream was Jesus Hates Jews or something. Jesus Hates Jewish people. What is it? What book? Now I have to find it. I said it. Now I have to find it. Because Jacob let me be the first person to tell you, probably not the first person, and I won't be the last person to tell you, that Jesus does not hate you. Jesus loves you. If you're pointing to Jesus and saying he hates this group of people, that's not Jesus that you're looking at very, very clearly. And I think you know that. And I would just encourage you, to not misrepresent the person of Christ. And I would just encourage you, as a Christian, Jesus hates Judaism. That's what it was. Jesus hates Judaism. It was this live stream right here. I think he's still alive. So yeah, Jesus doesn't hate. Jesus hates Judaism. Okay, that's. I think that's worded more carefully. So bravo for that, because Judaism is not a person, and probably one could say that Jesus hates anything that would prevent people from coming into contact with their Creator, God the Father. And I think that's one of the problems. And actually, Father Stephen DeYoung does kind of touch on it, so I'll get to this clip. It does seem that as Christians, and again, I'm sort of speaking from the Christian side of this coin, as Christians, we have a desire to look back into the ancient history of our religion to understand where it came from. And I think what we're doing is we are looking for Israel. We're going back and we are looking for Israel, and sort of in the way there, somewhere along the way, a lot of Christians find Judaism. But Judaism is not Israel. And so it gets confusing. Of course, I would say Judaism is not Israel. Does it have a role to play? Of course it does. And it's funny, there's a clip here of Jacob saying that Christians have a role to play. And it seems that, again, maybe we are sort of having the same conversation, but we're sort of still playing different games. And so I hope, if anything, that this live stream could help Christians and non-Christians understand what the biblical authors meant when they used the term Judean, Ioudaios, and why they use that term, and then sort of clarify that as we use the modern term of Jew, Jewish, Jewishness, Judaism, all of these words, to help sort of, well, and again, I would hope that we're not looking back into the past and, okay, so we're looking back at the ministry of Jesus to understand how he interacted with the Jewish religious system. And I think understanding these terms helps. And so this clip, I think, let's see, yeah, the Christian heritage clip from Father Stephen DeYoung, I think is going to be sort of important to continue that part of the conversation. I'll hang around. See, there's all these other, camera. We're all in little boxes, so I get to hang out over here near Yosef, and I would say, Yosef, Hezi, Matt C, David, Busatel. I think I've actually got your name down. So let me know. Those people have all been helpful in this conversation. So shout out to those guys. Thank you guys for what you do.
Like their parents, they're like boomer parents, sold their Christian heritage for a massive pottage, right? And so they've been completely cut off from like the Christian tradition on all these things. Like they don't have any connection to Christian festivals and holidays, right? I'm sure if I asked him, what about the Christian celebration of Passover? He wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Right? And so when they've been completely cut off from that and they don't understand what that is and how it relates to the Jewish traditions that Christianity came out of, right? Once those
Whoa, sorry. Epic fail.
Not backwards to Second Temple Judaism, Christianity came out of, then when they try to find some tradition to connect to, they try to sort of leapfrog, not backwards to Second Temple Judaism, but like laterally to present day Judaism.
I think is an important point. I agree with them. And that's what I do see that being part of the problem for Christians. You're looking back, you're hoping to find Israel, and you sort of get sidetracked by Second Temple Judaism or this other, whatever, this other form of Judaism. What's up, Grim? Good to see you, man.
To Second Temple Judaism, but like laterally to present day Judaism to try to find a sense of tradition. And I would suggest they should start with the Christian tradition, right? And then if they want to get into the Jewish roots of the actual Christian tradition, as they study it and understand it, cool, right? Great.
So Jewish roots of the actual Christian tradition, that I think is something to consider as we look back at the Bible and its use of the word Jew, Jewish, Judean. How many Christians out there would say that Christianity came from Judaism? That would be a question. Jasper, what is up? I don't feel like I've seen you before, so welcome if this is the first time. Howdy, everybody. I feel like that's a good question to ask. Like, how much of Christianity came out of Judaism, if anything? Based off of our understanding of what we just read in the Bible. Our English translation often uses the term Jew in the place of the word Judean. So, are we being anachronistic and therefore not faithful to the Jewish religious system that Jesus interacted with? What would you say? Yeah, at some point the Essenes were an in-between. That's what I was thinking about John the Baptist. I don't know that he was an Essene, but there are other groups, right? So part of this conversation is it's just not it's just sort of not helpful. There's like a group saying, we are Israel. I guess there's multiple groups saying that. The Christian church would say, we are Israel, right? And so how do you sift through that, right? What was John the Baptist? I mean, he called the Pharisees a brood of vipers, right? But I do think Christians make the mistake, I would say, to some degree, by looking by assuming Christianity came out of Judaism. Christianity came out of the person of Jesus. And then the question is, how did Jesus interact with that Second Temple Judaism? He seemed to interact with it, but also be somehow uninhibited by it, immune to it. What would be the word? I actually tweeted something about this. It would be too annoying for me to go find it, though. There's something about Jesus that was different. Let's just say it like that. And maybe, Grim, if you're still here, sort of mysteriously different, right? There's some, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes. Help me out with the Qumran, the Qumran groups. There was just a lot. There was a lot more going on, and I think we mistake it by just thinking, oh, Jesus was a Jew, and he interacted with Jews. It's like, okay, yeah, like in some way that's not wrong, but in another way it's clearly unhelpful to carry on any sort of conversation, any sort of nuanced conversation. Okay, so let's play this. I think I will... Yeah, I'll skip through some of this, but...
So one of the things
really
was
quiet,
surprised about Christianity was I really do see that God has planted within Christianity what Maimonides says is the preparation for the world, right? So when Paul says, we now see the world through a glass darkly, I actually think it's true. Christianity is Judaism viewed through a glass darkly, because it is those things which God made. It is Judaism easy as far as I'm concerned, because
okay, Judaism easy, Judaism light. So I'll have to. Okay, this was one of the clips that I was thinking of. Is Christianity seeing Judaism through a glass darkly? Is that what he's saying? And then sort of this idea that Christianity is Judaism light is very interesting. Of course, Jacob is a Jewish man, so we're getting the other side of the coin. And again, probably this is the way Jacob and I need to have a conversation. We've attempted, other ways, doesn't quite work out. So I don't know. And hopefully there's other more beneficial conversation to be had with other people, and maybe I'm not the best, sort of person to have this conversation. But for now, this is how Jacob and I get to interact with each other. Is Christianity Judaism light if Judaism stops at the circumcision of the flesh and never goes into the circumcision of the heart? That's where I would say that actually Christianity is taking, we've taken a galactic step forward. Right? This is not a man's religion that we're trying to follow, some sort of made up sort of human construct. We're really trying to hear from our Creator. We're really trying to hear the message that God has given us. That, is there a circumcision of the flesh? Yes, there's a circumcision of the flesh. That is pointing us to the circumcision of the heart. Which one is easy? I leave that to you.
As the Gentiles were coming in out of the complete darkness, and they were only willing to accept certain things. And this idea, but now as we are coming to the end times, I believe, right? I am, in my own life, I am seeing that verse from Zechariah, I believe it is, which says, 10 men from every nation will grab a Jew by his talit, by the hem of his garment, and say, "We want to go with you because we have heard God is with you." That is, I see something coming true in the world. I am seeing Israel, in fact, and Judaism being established. And one of the things I see is this disagreement that people are like, "What's a woman?"
Okay, so right there again, you hear Jacob in a way using Judaism and Israel interchangeably. I don't think we can do that. If anything, Judaism is a part of Israel in that it is part of the tribe of Judah. But to make then the claim that Judaism is Israel is too much. It's claiming too much of the data, to use a Michael Heiser sort of frame. Okay, so he brings up this passage in Zechariah. And again, to sort of drive the point home, thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days 10 men from all the nations, again, there's the nations, that's Ephraim, in a way that Israel goes into the nations, right, will grasp the garments of a Jew, saying, "Let us go with you, for we have heard God is with you." What is this word? I think you guessed it. Well, it's actually,
Ish.
yeah, the man of Judea. Let me, oh, we need to go here. A Judean man is the word. So we translate it Jew, and again, transport all this sort of modern understanding of what that passage might mean, but to Zechariah, who is a prophet prophesying to the nation of the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, he's saying, a day will come. Oh, no, now I missed it. I'm so bad at this. There it is. In those days, 10 men from all the nations will grasp the garment of a Judean man, saying, "Let us go with you," or a man of Judea. That's what the text says, right? But to make it sound like the nations will come to those who practice Judaism and say to them, "Let us go with you, for we have heard God is with you," is, I think, an improper interpretation of this passage. But feel free to chime in. Let me know. Like, it's not saying, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days, people are going to come and ask of those who practice Judaism to teach them." That's just not what it's saying. Judean man. Interestingly enough, there was a man of Judea who people came to have them teach him. Interestingly. So we'll continue on.
What is a woman? And it's like,
we'll skip part of this.
Mamlechet Kohanim, being a nation of priests, means being servants.
Okay.
Right? Who wants to lead will be the servants. And in a very real sense, I think as Jews, being Mamlechet Kohanim, being a nation of priests, means being servants. Right? But there is a specific service that includes a holiness code, which includes things like wearing phylacteries, like wearing tzitzit, like all of these things that, as a nation apart, God has commanded, and I don't think that's going away.
Yeah, and I actually agree with him. I think there are a lot of people looking for, because in a postmodern world where there is no morality, there's nothing to anchor you to reality. There was another part here, though.
Jesus. And there is a form of hierarchy, and again, 1 Corinthians 12. And I am unapologetic about this. Yes, I believe we are the chosen people.
Okay.
That's not because I believe. It is, in fact, the opposite of me believing that that I am somehow born better than you. I am going to heaven and you're going to hell, or anything like that at all. And for me, like Jesus says, do not be like the Gentiles. Those who want to lead will be the servants. And in a
Yeah. I don't know what to do with that. Yeah. A Jew that walks with God, a Judean man. Well, it's clearly that passage in Zechariah. It's clearly a Judean man who is being a light to the Gentiles. That's a clue that we're talking about Israel, not the religion of Judaism per se. Well, I'll skip through that. I mean, I just, okay, so there's some of Jacob's, right, chosen people. Again, it's difficult because you have a person who is religiously Jewish and ethnically Jewish. So there's another way of understanding the term, right? And so descendants of Abraham are meant to bless the nations. Okay, copy that. Got it. But of course, we read in the New Testament, it is the descendants of the faith of Abraham in that sense, right? Yep. Yeah. Forest researcher, welcome in. Correct. Yes. So what and I don't know if you've caught the beginning part of this, that there is a question as to how Jesus interacted with the Jewish religious system of the day. And he certainly interacted with it. He was certainly, I appreciate you posting, but to what degree? And is it being anachronistic for us to say that Jesus is a Jew in the sense that Jacob Federecci and others would say? I do think it's anachronistic. I think we're reading back into the text something that's not there. He was a Judean, and he participated in the religious system, but certainly in a way that got him killed. So the Jewish religious leaders of his day would have disagreed with the statement that we often make today, which is Jesus was a Jew. So they would have just disagreed with that. So in what way was he a Jew? He certainly was a Jew in the sense that he was a Judean. And I certainly think he is participating with the Jewish religious structure of the time, but in a way that, I guess immunity is one thing that comes to me, but that sounds like it's a negative thing. I think he's sort of showing us what it's meant to be. Okay, well, that's a lot to get to. I'm gonna play these clips and then I'll read up on your passages. Thank you for that. That's a lot. Let me just give me a second.
Logically, right? So in the Gospel of John, there's these Jews who say, we are descendants of Abraham. We were never slaves. And I read that and I'm like, what? Like this is like, I don't even understand how you can have a Jewish character in any work of fiction say that sentence.
But is the point? Is that the point? Are you understanding that text in the way that most Christian readers now reading it gloss right over?
Well, I gloss right over it.
It's supposed to be shocking, right? Is it supposed to be shocking that they said that, right?
Okay.
But St. John is Jewish and writing to a Jewish audience.
It's
right. What is this deliberately?
I cannot imagine a more heretical statement out of a Jew's mouth, and obviously heretical. In the preface, we are the descendants of Abraham, because like the covenant between the pieces, right?
Right.
It's like we are descendants of Abraham. We were never slaves. That like the only comparison I can make to that is we are Christians. Our Messiah was never crucified. Like that's the only.
Yeah. But there are a lot of there are a lot of part of what's going on in some of the gospel narratives is that it's showing that, or attempting to show, that a lot of the hatred and animus that was directed at Jesus by all quarters reached this level of irrationality. Like there's a place where in St. Matthew's Gospel where it says some of the Pharisees went and plotted together with the Herodians, and people just gloss over that.
I didn't. I'm like, what are you talking about?
This would be like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton got together to like discuss like how to, yeah. But that's trying to show like this, that it became so irrational that people who were bitter enemies, right, were sort of holding their noses and cooperating on this. Now, you may say that's not historic, right? I mean, so this is part of how when I interpret the scriptures, right? All of it. I'm after what the text says. Mm-hmm. I can't force you what you do with it after that, right? You can accept it, you can reject it, you can say, well, this is presenting an exaggerating thing to make a theological point. You can take it however, right? That's
okay. And Father Stephen Young, he's going to go into some stuff it's a little off the topic, but I do think it's helpful as far as like how we sort of, again, we kind of modern readers read back into the text a lot of our modern presuppositions, and we're asking of the original author questions that the original author would have never asked. And I do think it's helpful. But right there, like that is the point of that passage in John 8. The point is that it is irrational, that there were religious leaders who completely didn't understand Jesus, and that John is using irony. We'll do more in the future about the narrative structure of the Bible, but I think that God reveals his truth, and it's art. It is artwork. It is also historical. So, it doesn't dismiss the history, but John is obviously employing irony as he does throughout his gospel. And I tried to get Jacob to understand this, to make a point, to point at what's going on deep down inside. Now, how much of this happened on the surface? If you were there with a video camera, would you have recorded this scene exactly the way John writes it? I don't know. Maybe you would have. But the point is that by employing the irony, John is actually getting us to understand something that's more true of the situation between Jesus and the religious leaders than maybe even what was on the surface at the time, that there was this deep hatred for the man Jesus. It was an irrational hatred for the man Jesus, so much so that a Jew would come to him and say, we are Abraham's descendants. We have never been enslaved to anyone, when they clearly have, right? How is it that you say we will be free? Again, this is the circumcision of the heart. If you want to stop at the circumcision of the flesh, you will not understand Jesus. If you want to stay with Moses in Moab, you will not understand Jesus. He is Joshua leading his people into the promised land, and we have to understand that. Does that mean we do away with Moses? Certainly not. We treasure Moses. We treasure the law for what it's pointing us to. But we can also understand the limits of the law, that it cannot do what Joshua can do. It cannot do what the prophet Joshua can do. And again, Hezi, Yosef have been super helpful on this. Obviously, Moses is a prophet, and I get that. But Joshua's book is the first book in the list of prophets. And that's not something to be overlooked, that it takes a prophet whose name is Joshua, which happens to be Jesus' name, right? Okay. There's this but of course, do they see that? Can you allow yourself to see that possibility? And I think the answer is no. And I don't want to belabor this point. Jacob and I tried to discuss this further, but that was why after Jacob posted this tweet, I quoted this verse from John 8 because the same sentiment was being repeated today by Jacob that was there in John 8. Jewish knees have not bowed for 2,000 years. Christians know that disproves the idea that Jesus could be the Messiah and can't handle the truth. But of course, Jewish knees have bowed. So the same sentiment, the same sort of, can you allow yourself to see the truth of the situation, which is, for one, yes, there was this irrationality that would say, well, we're Abraham's descendants, we've never been slaves. To say, well, the Jewish knee has never been bowed. Well, of course, like individually, we all bow the knee. We all have our sin. We all have our idols. We serve these little private idols. So yes, whatever knees we are talking about do bow to false gods, don't they? Or our particular little religious groups bow to whatever ideology we think makes us right and others wrong. The idol of the law that is present in Christianity as well as Judaism. Our heritage, our genealogies, right? The New Testament talks about this. Maybe the temple becomes an idol for some. So corporately in our little religious groups, we have idols. So of course, like again, Jacob, like this is just the sentiment is being repeated ironically 2,000 years later in a tweet that's sort of meant to disprove the very thing that it's talking about. These people groups have bowed the knee geopolitically, right? Okay, so think about this. I'm assuming Jacob's tweet is in reference to 70 AD, Rome. It's like, okay, since Rome, okay, we bowed the knee there. We kind of buckled. But since then, we haven't bowed the knee. Okay, fine. You're like, whatever, bravo. But if that were true, why hasn't the temple been rebuilt? Somebody's bowing the knee to somebody. The same irrational, it's like we can't see Jesus for who, we can't allow ourselves to see the reality that's in front of us. We can't allow ourselves to believe that Jewish people have bowed the knee. Just like we can't allow ourselves to believe that descendants of Abraham had ever been enslaved. It's the same sentiment. It's virtually the same wording. It's deeply ironic. And that's what John is pointing to. He's getting us, comedy, irony is a part of comedy, and comedy has a way of revealing the condition of your soul. Are you prepared to receive that irony? People whose souls, and I'm not talking about any individual person, I'm certainly not talking about Jacob or whoever. I don't actually know Jacob, we just interact online. And he's a helpful interlocutor. He's a helpful person to sort of help me sift through some of my own ideas, despite the fact that we can be we can misunderstand each other very easily, which is unfortunate. If you cannot receive the comedy, if you can't laugh at yourself and your own stupidity, then the soul is a particular type of rottenness that just has to, like the Jews, sort of, I need to just lie to myself. I can't allow myself to see it because seeing it is too painful. And so that inwardly the soul just starts, and this is what Jesus said, whitewashed tombs, inside dead men's bones, right? Again, I'm not talking about you, Jacob, if you happen to see this. I'm not talking about any individual person. Just that's what Jesus was saying. He's talking about that condition of the heart that will put on the outer facade of holiness and righteousness when inwardly it's rotten. How do you know that inwardly you're rotten? You can't laugh at yourself. You can't laugh at the deep irony of John 8:33. You can't allow yourself to think my group is wrong. There's a whole part of this, excuse me as I bump, there's a whole part of this that if it's true of Judaism, I think I see it also in Christianity. It's like Satan, right? He cannot create anything of his own. What he takes is God's creation and perverts it and twists it. And so what I see in the church, and again, I'm not a student of Judaism, so I cannot speak of Judaism in this regard. But what I see in the church is that people are distracted away from the truth of God by these things that look like the truth but aren't, or the people who pretend to be the people of God who aren't. Again, that's another Jacob tweet where he said that the Trinity is the greatest lie the devil ever pulled off, and what I said was the greatest lie was actually to convince Adam and Eve, who were made in the image of God, that they weren't, and the second is like it, to convince people who are not the people of God that they are, because then they don't go looking for him. That's the parable of the wheat and the chaff that Jesus was talking about. They look like wheat, but they're not. And so people who are honestly seeking the kingdom of God, they're honestly seeking Zion, the city of God, they're honestly seeking to be a part of the people of God, the true Israel, are distracted by either, I would say probably watered down Christianity that has the same idols that we were just talking about, or these other religions that come in and claim to be the truth but aren't. So 2,000 years of not agreeing on the definition. Still assume Christians exist even without consciousness. Well, and that's an interesting thing, right? It's like every time somebody says Christianity is dead, it's like, here we are, man, like 2,000 years later. It doesn't seem like we're going anywhere. Oh gosh, this is so, talking about deep irony. Can we double back on this? Why hasn't the temple been rebuilt? Who's been, if Jacob is right here, Jewish knees have not bowed for 2,000 years. Where is the temple? Why hasn't the temple been rebuilt? You know, the deep irony of that question is it has been rebuilt. It's just not where you think it is. Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, Herod's temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it took 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days. But he was speaking of the temple of his body. But can you allow yourself to see that? There is no temple in his heavenly city, is there? I'm so bad at finding Bible verses, excuse me. I know it's here somewhere. Yeah. Revelation 21:22. And I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple, and the city has no need for the sun or of the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illuminated it, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light. Again, what is Israel? And the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. He will bring the two sticks together. He will bring back his people. And who are his people? The descendants of the faith of Abraham. Descendants of the faith. God is up to something. He's up to something. And I do think the 12 tribes, I do think there's a part of that. They are a part of this story. Those brothers, right? This whole thing sort of shines back to it. The walls are the 12 sons of Israel. So I think that's fascinating, right? But where do we go from here? I guess we go back to Jacob and Father Stephen, so that I can just at least be done. I can put this thing to rest a little bit to some degree.
But most of the people I talk to try to defend it. I call this the crayon, and the only good argument I found for the crayon is the early Christians were trying to hide the text from Romans as kind of like, samizdat under the Soviets. And so there were statements which were so exaggeratedly like the opposite of anything that could make any sense that the audience would be like, okay, like this is somebody talking like in South Korea, in North Korea, talking about how the Kims are so generous and like, it's like, yeah, this stuff never obviously this stuff never happened like this, and like,
yeah, obviously this stuff never happened like this. Again, are you willing to see it? Now, so the point would be that somehow the Christians, and again, I don't think of Bible as coded at all. I think sometimes we've lost the ability to interpret it well, but it's not in code. Somehow the Christians were trying to be generous to the Romans by making the Jews look bad. Yeah, I just don't think that's a very accurate view of history. Christians were constantly standing up against Rome, and they died for that. So why would they, at the same time, be willing to die to stand against Rome and try to write in their scriptures some way of sort of like cozying up to Rome? It just wouldn't make sense.
There's code that it's encoded in a way.
Part of that is, so this is within American Protestantism. This is a dynamic where.
Okay, so for context, Father Stephen DeYoung is an Orthodox priest, Christian Orthodox.
When modernism and positivism got a hold of history in 18th and 19th century Germany, and wanted to turn it into a science, right? We're going to determine what really happened, right? So now Book of Joshua is all propaganda. Some escaped slaves from Egypt led a Marxist insurrection against their Canaanite, landlords. Right? Whenever we reconstruct what really happened in the background, right. Because of all of history is the history of class struggle, right?
Demythologize.
Yeah.
I hear that. I read that word a lot. Demythologize.
And the response to that.
Well, and okay, again, just to sort of tie this to the sort of front end of this conversation, that would be an example of sort of being anachronistic. Maybe that's even going too far and just sort of being propaganda.
By American Christians was not to attack the modernist presuppositions of that. It was to try to use the same methodology to come to opposite results. Right? It was, no, we're going to do the same kind of history. We're going to say, no, this is like if you had a time machine and a video camera, right? Like this is exact word for word what they said.
That very unfortunately.
Okay, so, and sorry, I'm interrupting. That's the weird thing about having these conversations online, so you can just pause people. Yeah, and so when sort of modernism came in to sort of try to scientifically, archaeologically sort of disprove the Bible, the biblical scholars sort of didn't correct the modernist assumptions of what the Bible is. They went to the Bible with those modernist assumptions and said, I'm going to prove you wrong using your own methodology, when that's not really the way the Bible was written. Again, the Bible does faithfully record history, but it's not recording history for the purpose of history. It's recording history for the purpose of theology. And so, again, going back to John 8 and sort of John's use of irony and things like that is an important part of that conversation. So I just appreciated Father Stephen DeYoung for that, even though it is, in a way is sort of a side point, but
this is something that has started to seep into Judaism, and where we have started, like, I think it's just childish. It's
okay.
just
So that's a separate clip. And I don't know about this. I mean, I think that's kind of it for Jacob and Father Stephen DeYoung. He basically just says, the way Christians look at the Bible is just childish. And my point to that is, you're exactly right. We're called to be childlike. And again, that's the irony. Is your soul prepared for that type of humiliation? Or if you're not prepared to read the Bible like a child, is it revealing in you that pride that is going to obscure your vision, right? We are Abraham's descendants. We have never yet been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say we will be? We don't want the type of freedom that Jesus is offering. We don't even need it, because we've never been slaves, of course, during the Roman occupation, etc., etc. So again, deep irony. But can we hear it? Can we see it? What is it? What would it take? It would take the humility of a child. It would take the sense of dependence on the Spirit of God that we as Christians have, which, again, talking about deep irony, that's the inheritance that was promised to the descendants of Abraham. I will be your people, you will be my people, and I will be your God. And he makes his dwelling with us through the Spirit. So that's the inheritance, and is in some way evidence of that inheritance, evidence that true Israel is out there, and that you see it when it starts to shine light into those dark places. And I think, I've seen it in my own life. So that's that. That might be it. That might be where we put a bow on it. Thank you for hanging out. I was not sure how long this was gonna go. If you're here with me near the end or at the end, I appreciate you. Let me know if you were here for the beginning. I usually stream for about an hour, but I knew this one was gonna go long. And I think it deserves our time and attention. I think that, again, I think that people maybe dismiss this. I think that within the Twitter world, there's sort of unhelpful conversation going on. Maybe people just sort of, whatever. And again, not giving it the nuance that it deserves. Maybe not treating it with the respect that it deserves, etc., etc. And I do, again, I sort of said this at the beginning, but I just want to make sure that we are not part of perpetuating some sense of animosity between people. I am a part of a group of people looking for truth. That's what I am. So, I don't know about these other people on Twitter. So if this video is helpful at all in that conversation, get that like button, share it with. The two things that I think are the best things to do is comment, let me know what you think, give me your feedback so I can sift through my own ideas, and then share it with a friend and continue the conversation. Those two things I think are how we use the internet. That's how we use the internet. That's how we change the world. That's how we beat the AI super robots that are coming to end humanity. Maybe that's a different podcast for another day. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys, and I will catch you in the next one.